Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. As of June 20th, the federal government is lifting most of the mandates permitting unvaxxed Canadians to now fly out of a Canadian airport. Recall that since October 31st, the Canadian government has mandated that anyone who did not receive two COVID-19 jabs were not permitted to board a plane, train, or ferry in this country. That meant that unvaxxed Canadians, which number in the millions, were grounded from travel and effectively trapped in their own country. Think about that for a second. You could not leave your country unless you received a specific medical treatment. Furthermore, thousands of unvaxxed airline staff lost their jobs due to refusing their shots. Of course, we have all seen the recent images and read the daily stories of the complete chaos at airports and the long delays, and all too often, the canceled flights leaving passengers stranded. Will the drop in vaccine mandate mean that the airports will now function again? Will the staff who have lost their jobs in the industry be rehired if they even want to go back to a workplace which discriminated against them in the first place? What does the relaxing of the COVID measures for travel mean for you, the Canadian? Well, joining now to help unpack it all is Greg Hill, founder and co-director of Free to Fly, an organization representing over 3,000 aviation professionals and tens of thousands of Canadians who have been adversely impacted by the mandates. Greg, thank you so much for joining me. We spoke several months ago, but that was a little bit of a different climate then. I think we were in the middle of the Freedom Convoy. That was a good chat. And now all of a sudden, the federal government announced they're lifting the mandates. They're lifted. They've been lifted. What does that mean? What exactly was lifted?
Well, it's an interesting thing, like you say, to unpack. I watched the presser last week, which frankly was a little bit difficult to hang on throughout the entire thing, just given the arrogance and the attitude of the government, going so far as to point out their lack of regret for anything that they had forced upon the citizens that they're supposed to serve over the last 7, 8 months or years, really, if you want to look at what's happened over the past couple of years. So it's not certainly an abject victory, but I do want to recognize the thousands and thousands of Canadians who've remained steadfast in pushing back against these mandates. I think it's important to recognize that we have seen the narrative shift. Our government was really alone in a very unpopular way globally in continuing to push these mandates to the point where you even had the legacy media calling for them to be dropped and for workers to return. And that's really the result of changing the narrative, which is what we've been pushing throughout. We can't outsource change. We can't expect somebody else to be a remote savior. We need the citizens of this country to stand up for their God-given freedoms, and that's what we've seen. But to your question, medical segregation remains within the travel sector. If you're unjabbed on return from finally being able to leave your country, you do have to quarantine. You've got to submit to this nonsensical ArriveCan, which even some of the border mayors and politicians in the States are calling to be dropped because it's creating such chaos in some of these border type economies. So it's absolutely not an end to the battle that we're fighting. As far as our employees go, that's a whole separate question as to what we're going to see over the next number of weeks.
Yeah, and I definitely do want to talk about the employees who were let go from their jobs or suspended. You talked about the chaos at the border, and the steadfastness of Canadians who, weren't going to violate their conscience and held their ground, if you will. To me, it seemed, though, that the impetus to suspending, because it was a suspension, to suspending these mandates was actually the chaos we saw in one particular airport, and that was Toronto Pearson Airport. And when that one NHLer, recorded this video of his experience. We only have about 30 seconds before commercials. We can pick this up again. But do you think it was the chaos in the airports that really forced the Prime Minister to say, you know what, we've got to retract this?
It may have been the straw that broke the camel's back, but it's a collection, and I think that's what's so important to recognize. one gentleman that you're speaking of records a video, and it probably made a difference. But so did the actions of so many other people, and that's why we keep saying it matters. When you're tired and fatigued and don't want to push back anymore, it actually matters. You don't really know the impact you're having until
Right.
you see things start to fall.
Okay, let's continue this discussion in just a few moments when we return.